決まりましたか？
裏切らない。もしも裏切ったら殺していい。
1番です。
わかりました。では1番の方は前へ。
When I think about Sound Euphonium 3, this is the moment I think of. Easily the defining moment of the season, set within the defining episode of possibly the entire series as a whole. This is the culmination of everything built up by Season 1, Season 2, the movies, and of course, Season 3. And yet it's also one of the biggest, most shocking, devastating, and controversial twists in recent anime history. Hey guys, Andre here, and welcome back to my shelf. Happy Eupho Sunday. It is the 10th anniversary of Sound Euphonium and the first anniversary of Sound Euphonium 3, so we're celebrating by doing a deep dive into the narrative themes of Season 3 and exploring the path that Kumiko followed to get to the stunning finale where she lost the Soli audition but led Kitauji to win gold at the National All-Japan Band Competition, while fully exploring the themes of leadership, hard work, and the search for one's purpose. Some of the questions I want to answer in this video are: who is Mayu and what challenges does she bring Kumiko as the club president? What made Kumiko the right choice to be club president, and how do her actions lead Kitauji to victory? Why did Kumiko lose the Soli in the end, and for what reason did they change the ending of the novel? And why did Kumiko choose the career path she ended up choosing? Following right after Ensemble Contest, Kumiko enters her third year at Kitauji High School as the new Wind Ensemble Club president, and she is joined by her not-boyfriend Shuichi as the vice president and her girlfriend Reina as the drum major, a role that was previously only for the annual Sunrise Festival, but is now a permanent position for the entirety of the band's competition run. A minor but welcome change for a leadership team set on claiming gold at nationals. The first episode also introduces us to some of the new first years, including a first-time euphonium player named Kaho, a couple of eccentric first-time tuba players named Yayoi and Suzume, and most importantly, an experienced clarinetist named Sally. Apart from that, it's same old for the Kitauji Wind Ensemble and for our favorite kiddos in the bass section. That is, until the arrival of one Kuroe Mayu.
ごめんなさい。私、黒江真由と言います。
So, who is Mayu? A third-year transfer student and skilled euphoniumist. At first she appears to just be a perfectly nice, though perhaps overly considerate person. Before she joins the band, she asks Kumiko multiple times to make sure it'll be okay.
本当に？本当に大丈夫？むしろみんな歓迎してくれると思うよ。久美子ちゃんは嫌じゃない？私、やるなら UFO がいいんだけど。だけど、迷惑だったらすぐ言ってね。私はいつ辞めても構わないから。
You'd think President Floof here would by this point know instinctively what kind of trouble a presence like Mayu could bring to the band, but she either doesn't realize it yet or is purposefully trying to ignore it. Interestingly enough, behind the scenes, none of the actors were told in advance how the story would end, except for Tomatsu Haruka, the voice of Mayu.
でも私だけアフレコ始まる前に実はシナリオ全話いただいてたんですね。読んどいた方がいいっていうポジションだったので、なのであえて1話のアフレコの前日に最終話を読んでから臨んだんですけど、うわーなんかだったんですね。ヒリヒリしてました一人だけ。
Nevertheless, Mayu peacefully joins the Wind Ensemble as Kitauji's newest euphonium player, boasting the same amount of experience as Kumiko. And as a character, Mayu basically steps back into the periphery for the first half of the season. A slightly mysterious presence for sure, but not causing any trouble or worry. She gets along with everyone, she adapts quickly during ensemble practice, and she gives good guidance to the first years. The first sign of anything vaguely ominous concerning her comes in episode 3, Mizuiro Prelude. In this episode, a rumor surfaces that a contingent of the first year students plan to quit the club due to Reina's strict coaching. Obviously, as the club prez, it's important to Kumiko to talk to them and try to address and solve the problem. But Mayu says,
そんなに大げさにすることかな。部活やめるって普通にあることでしょ？そんなにしなくても。でも仲間なわけだし。辞めたい子は辞めて部活から解放されるし、残った子はその子を気にせず演奏に集中できるようになる。むしろいいことなんじゃない？たかが部活なんだし。
Mayu loves music and she enjoys playing in an ensemble, but she has no attachment to Kitauji or its members. Of course, part of that comes simply from the fact that she's a third-year transfer student, but a big part also comes from her troubled backstory, which we learn much later in the season. But of course, Kumiko doesn't know this yet, and she is instead left with a vague, uneasy feeling whenever she interacts with Mayu. In episode 5, Kumiko finds herself rejecting Mayu's invite to go to the Agata Matsuri with her and lying to her about already having plans with Reina. And in episode 6, when Mayu finds Kumiko playing Hibike Euphonium to herself, Kumiko hesitates to share anything about it with her. Though for her part, Mayu seems desperate to fade away into the background most of the time. When the band decides they will be holding auditions before each major competition, Mayu asks Kumiko multiple times if she should forfeit the auditions. And each time, Kumiko, being reminded of Kanade's experience in Chikai no Finale, tries to convince her otherwise. It isn't until episode 7, the pool episode, when Kumiko finally understands why she is put off by Mayu. She reminds her of her middle school self. The very same middle school self who didn't care that her band won a dud gold, who blurted out to a sobbing Reina,
本気で全国行けると思ってたの？
the very same middle school self that Kumiko is desperate to grow out of.
中学の頃の私に戻っちゃいそうで。特に目標もなく、言われたまま流れに乗って、こんなもんかって毎日過ごして。
But Mayu has an even weaker sense of self, explaining in the pool episode that she doesn't have any strong preferences or opinions on anything. But can that really be true? We'll come back to that later, but let's talk about what really are the biggest similarities between Kumiko and Mayu, and why Kumiko sees her reflection in Mayu. Well, for one, they both have a naturally passive, go-with-the-flow kind of personality. Despite actively trying to grow out of it, Kumiko admits as much during her student-teacher meeting with Michie sensei.
つまり将来のビジョンが描けていないということだな。
はい、昔から流されがちというか。
Kumiko and Mayu have also both been described as nice by their kohai, which, as we know from Haruka's experience in season 1, is the go-to adjective when you have no idea how to describe someone.
小笠原先輩だってすごいところいっぱいあるじゃないですか。
じゃあそれを言ってみてよ。
気配りできるし優しいし。
他には？
その後輩にちゃんと挨拶してくれるし、たまに差し入れも入れてくれて優しいし。
優しいしかないじゃない。優しいな。
ありがとうございます。大前部長は優しいですね。いや、優しいとかじゃなくて部長と下級生もみんなまゆちゃんのこと大好きだって言ってるよ。話しやすいし優しいしちゃんと教えてくれるし。それはそうした方がみんなが喜んでくれるから。本当はしたくないってこと？どうなんだろう。
Most importantly though, Mayu mirrors Kumiko's middle school self in the way she lacks any strong ambitions or desires. Back in middle school, Kumiko's apathy towards competition put her into direct conflict with Reina. Now, Kumiko is just as motivated as Reina to bring Kitauji gold at nationals, which is putting her into direct conflict with Mayu. All Mayu wants to do is play in an ensemble. She couldn't care less about nationals. That's why she keeps asking Kumiko if she ought to forfeit the audition. That's why she asked Kumiko if it would be okay to join Kitauji's band in the first place, and that's why she had such apathy towards the first years who were planning on quitting. Above all else, Mayu values keeping the peace in the band and keeping everyone happy, which is also probably why she is such a skilled ensemble performer.
うまいもんね、まゆちゃん。
うまいというか勘がいい。滝先生の求める音をすぐに理解して、それに合わせて吹くことができる。
As a refresher, at the start of season 3, Kumiko, Reina, and Shuichi helped Taki-sensei pick Kitauji's competition piece Hitotose no Uta, and the third movement of Hitotose no Uta begins with a euphonium trumpet duet soli. Naturally, Kumiko and Reina want to play that soli together at nationals, but Mayu stands in their path. Unfortunately for Kumiko, Mayu's apathy towards competition doesn't stop her from taking the euphonium soli during the second round of auditions.
ユーフォニアム3年黒江真由さん。
はい。
So the question is, how does Kumiko overcome Mayu? Does she even? And how does Mayu continue to challenge Kumiko in the climactic second half of the season? In an interview for the Eupho 3 Memorial Fanbook, series director Ishihara Tatsuya said this about Mayu. The way I look at it, Kumiko has already defeated 2 boss characters, Asuka during her first year, and Kanade during her second year. But when I read the third year novels, I felt that Kumiko could not defeat the character of Mayu. Even after the pool episode, even after Kumiko realizes why she is magnetically repelled by Mayu, she still doesn't have all the pieces together to know how to overcome that. She's able to help out all the other band members who have come to her with problems by this point, which we'll talk more about later, but the Mayu problem is still, well, a problem. In the second half of the season, Mayu continues her shtick of basically every 5 minutes asking Kumiko if she should forfeit the next audition or if they should switch parts.
やっぱり私辞退した方がいいんじゃないかな。やっぱり辞退しようか。やっぱり変わった方がやっぱり
To the point that the usually level-headed Kumiko finally loses her patience. Sidebar, but I just have to shout out the amazing acting performances in this season on both the animation side and the voice side. This scene in particular I think is so impressive and subtle, the way you can both see and hear how much Kumiko is struggling to control her frustration while talking to Mayu.
久美子ちゃん大丈夫？どうしたの？私ね、やっぱり変わった方がいいと思うの。私はソリじゃなくても。お願いだから二度とそういうこと言わないで。ごめん。謝らなくていいよ。私、本当に気にしてないから。部屋戻るんだよね。一緒に行ってもいい？休みたいから一人にさせてもらってもいいかな。
Tomio Kurosawa deserves every award she probably won't even be nominated for. But back on topic, Mayu's priority is keeping everyone happy. Kumiko's priority is getting Kitauji gold at nationals. So who's in the right? Obviously both are chasing ideals. There's no way to make sure everyone is 100% happy, and there's no way to 100% ensure Kitauji's chances of getting gold. But because Kumiko is so laser focused on that goal, well, at least a lot more so than Mayu, at this point in the season she still has yet to see the mistake she's making with Mayu. Part of Kumiko's selfish ideal is that everyone in Kitauji participates in the auditions whether they want to or not. The reason being, again, their goal is to go to nationals and win gold, something they failed to do the last 2 years, and so they want the absolute best skilled players their club has to offer. If someone doesn't want to audition like Mayu, it's just a matter of convincing them to, like Kumiko did successfully the previous year with Kanade. That's why Kumiko keeps defending Kitauji's meritocratic system and not truly trying to listen to Mayu, just trying to change her mind to no avail.
私が選ばれて嬉しい人なんて本当にいるのかな？いるよ。誰？部員全員。
Funnily enough, this is not the first time Kumiko fell into that particular rhetorical fallacy.
でもみんな言ってます。
アスカ先輩がいいって。みんな？みんなって誰？それは。
But Mayu isn't totally blameless here either. The very fact that she keeps asking Kumiko the same thing over and over and over again without changing her strategy shows she isn't really trying to understand Kumiko's side either. Plus, is Mayu really being true to herself when she says that she doesn't care about the auditions or the soli? Well, first let's answer the question. How does Kumiko overcome Mayu? And by that I mean, how can Kumiko help Mayu understand her perspective while also understanding and respecting Mayu's perspective as well? Well, it seems almost too simple, too obvious, but they just need to talk. But to each other, not at each other. And Kumiko finally finds a way to break the ice with Mayu after talking to Kaneda in episode 11. She finally realizes what the missing piece of the Mayu puzzle is, the final thing that links the two of them together, their shared trauma. In episode 12, just before the final audition, Kumiko finally meets Mayu eye to eye. She apologizes to her for her insensitive actions during the season and asks her point blank about her past audition trauma. Kumiko, of course, went through some trauma herself in middle school. When she was chosen to join the competition group over her senpai because of an audition, her senpai lashed out at her. So Mayu finally reveals her backstory. It's left somewhat vague, but she explains that she once had a close friend who was also a euphonium player. But after getting chosen over her multiple times from auditions, some drama broke out and she quit music altogether. This experience is what shaped Mayu to the person we know today. Someone who is very skilled with the euphonium, likes playing music in an ensemble, but is desperate to avoid auditions. And Kumiko finally recognizes the inconsistency in that description and the conflict in her. In the pool episode, Mayu claims to be someone who has no sense of self and has no strong desires, opinions, or preferences. But it turns out, Mayu does have a strong passion after all, music. That's why she can't bring herself to play poorly and fail the auditions on purpose, and why she is constantly asking Kumiko to let her forfeit instead. Ever since the incident with her friend, Mayu has had an inner conflict between the part of herself devoted to music and the part of herself paralyzed by the fear of causing band drama. And this inner conflict manifests itself in a way where she plays perfectly during practice and during auditions, but when she talks to people about it, particularly Kumiko, she puts on an extreme people-pleaser persona and claims not to care about any of it. And Kumiko is probably the first person to ever see through this and recognize Mayu for who she is deep down, which catches her off guard.
演奏に嘘はつきたくない。知ってるよ。少なくともまゆちゃんの演奏はどうでもいいって思ってる人の演奏じゃないよ。
To bring it back to the video game boss analogy that Tatsuya Ishihara brought up earlier, this conversation with Mayu in episode 12 is Kumiko's final battle, and she just discovered the enemy's weak point and delivered a critical hit. Kumiko goes on to explain that Reina was the one who broke her from her middle school passivity, and because of the experience they had in their first year at Kitauji with the trumpet solo audition, they made a promise.
音で決めるべきだ。上手い人が吹くべきだって。あの時の気持ちを3年間信じてきたことを裏切りたくない。これは私のわがまま。
And even though Kumiko has explained this to Mayu so many times, that Kitauji is a meritocracy, so the best player wins, I think it never really sank in for Mayu how strongly Kumiko believed in that. Because those words are probably similar to what Mayu heard from her friend before her friend eventually snapped. But now Mayu realizes that Kumiko means what she says, or at least that she's determined to follow through with this conviction to the very end after spending the whole season learning what that really means. And I think it's in this moment that Kumiko ultimately defeats Mayu by finally seeing her and getting through to her. Now the literal results of the audition don't matter as long as she stays true to herself and her convictions. Kumiko loves Kitauji. She loves it because they prioritize merit over seniority, because it's a place where talented players like Mayu have a chance to thrive.
久美子先輩って才能ある子好きですよね。あ、なんかわかる。ですよね。
And so she's willing to do whatever it takes to win Kitauji gold at nationals, no matter the cost. Even if the cost is losing her chance to play the duet with Reina. But perhaps that's the type of sacrifice a leader has to make. So what made Kumiko the right choice to be the next Kitauji Wind Ensemble Club president in the first place? And how does she grow into the role over the course of the season? I think the first thing to note that's interesting is the way Kitauji selects the next club leaders is just simply by having the current club leaders choose who to pass the role on to. Unlike the stressful audition process, which pits everyone against each other in a way, this process is much more about passing the torch to the next generation. In the third-year sequel/spin-off novel Minna no Hanashi, Ayano Takeda writes, during middle school, Ririka's concert band used a candidate voting system to decide who would be president. Kitauji's system was completely different from that. Their senpais selected who would be in that role. Her senpais, President Yuko Yoshikawa and President Kumiko Omae, and the people before them would entrust the role to the next generation. The biggest pro was that it didn't provide any psychological harm to people not selected, but one negative might be that they didn't take the person's opinion into consideration. And it's safe to say that Kumiko was probably more blindsided by her senpai's decision to make her the next club president than we were as the audience. She is the main character of the show after all. But within the world of the show, she's just one of the Euphonium players, and not one who held any particularly notable roles in the club before this. Normally you'd think the club leader role would go to someone with a much more showy instrument like a trumpet or a saxophone, or someone who's special in some way. But it may be precisely because Kumiko is just an ordinary Euphonium player that she was the perfect choice for president. In fact, she isn't just an ordinary Euphonium player, what am I saying? She's probably one of the most Euphonium-y Euphonium players to ever play the Euphonium. Asuka's words, not mine.
お前ちゃんはほんと UFO っぽいね。私自分のこと UFO っぽくないってずっと思ってたんだ。だから大前ちゃん見た時びっくりしたの。こんなに UFO っぽい子がいるんだって。
褒めてます？
褒めてるよ。だからかな。話聞いてほしいって思ったのは。
So what exactly does it mean to be Euphonium-y? And how does that translate to leadership potential? Well, let's think about it. What role does the euphonium play in an ensemble? As Sound Euphonium likes to remind us, the low brass section of the band in general is often the least popular section and as a result has the hardest time recruiting members. The instruments are big and cumbersome to handle and they rarely ever get to play the main melodies in ensemble music. But the euphonium stands out among this group because of its wide range of pitches and its warm, versatile sound. Because of these qualities, the euphonium is considered the lead instrument and soloist of the low brass family, and is often used to support or double almost every other instrument in the band. John Philip Sousa, the famous American marching composer and conductor, as well as the co-inventor of the sousaphone, once said, "A band is only as good as its euphonium section." And whether she did it knowingly or not, just like a euphonium, Kumiko really did naturally find herself supporting or getting involved with players from nearly every section of the band during her first 2 years at Kitauji. From tuba players to other euphonium players, to sax players, trumpet players, flute players, oboe players, trombone players, and percussion players, she touched the lives of so many people in the band without even necessarily trying. The fact is, even before she became club president, Kumiko's schoolmates liked and trusted her, enough for some of them to even open up to her. In metaphorical terms, she has a natural talent for opening windows, whether she knows it or not.
窓開けるのうまいね。
え？
さっきちょっとしか開かなかったから。
ああ、内側からだとコツがいるのかもしれませんね。
そうじゃない。やっぱり自分が分かってたらいいことだから。
私は分かってないですけど。
窓開けるの上手で嬉しかった。それだけ。
はい。
And in season 3, once she became president, we can add to that list of people she supported another tuba player, a clarinet player, a contrabass player, and even a French horn player, though indirectly.
竹川さん。
はい。
初心者のあなたがここまでできるって見せてくれたから、みんなも頑張れたんだと思う。
ありがとうございます。ありがとう。
聞いてたの？
I don't know if this necessarily means Kumiko makes an effective leader per se, but she no doubt is a natural-born supporter of people. And in a Kitauji governed by meritocracy, where skills are prioritized over any individual's feelings, I think that makes Kumiko uniquely qualified to be president and add the human being back into the equation, more so than even her most talented peers.
それは理解できないんじゃなくて、自分の努力不足を棚に上げて思い通りにならないって、そんな言い訳か文句が大半でしょ。私はそうは思わない。久美子、これだけ部員から疑問の声が出ているものを部長として無視はできないよ。
And so, with Kumiko as club president, we see her tending to individual students' issues for most of the first half of season 3, all the while learning what her role as club president really means. She won't be able to fix every problem, but as the club president, just being available as a safe space for students to have their concerns heard makes a world of difference.
サリーちゃん個人の悩みでも他の1年生の問題でも全部話してよ。きっとみんなどこか似たような悩み抱えてると思うから。で、これじゃ何一つ解決になってないよね。でもちゃんと話せばなんとかなるんじゃないかって私は思ってる。だって目指してる場所は同じだから。
But there is a limit to how effective it is to just hear people out, which Kumiko learns the hard way in the latter half of the season. If you recall, in the latter half of the season, Kumiko loses the Euphonium soli to Mayu during the second audition, among other major changes to the competition membership, the fallout of which sends shockwaves across the band, including, of course, to Kumiko herself. Eventually, to Kumiko's panic, the club members start to doubt the necessity of having multiple rounds of auditions in the first place, and Taki-sensei's judgment is called into question by many to Reina's frustration. And thus, the Kitauji wind ensemble is thrown into disarray just before the critical Kansai competition where they ended their run the previous year. And it's up to the club leaders, namely Kumiko, Reina, and Shuichi, to bring everyone back together. Unfortunately, the three of them are also in disarray. Reina is quick to scold anyone who badmouths Taki-sensei, Shuichi is quick to tell her she's being too harsh, and Kumiko is stuck in the middle of them racking her brain for a better solution. She and Shuichi at one point come to the conclusion that they need to involve Taki-sensei. Kumiko pitches the idea to Reina that they should have Taki-sensei explain to the entire band why he made the decisions he made during the auditions. Reina, I think rightfully, rejects the idea. Not only is it unbecoming of the club president to rely on the conductor to help solve student drama as Reina suggests, but I think it would also put Taki-sensei in an unnecessary position where he has to prove his expertise and authority to his own students. Also, when Kumiko visits Asuka to ask for her advice in episode 10, she immediately points out the selfishness in this proposal.
偉そうなこと言ってるけどさ、結局大前ちゃんのわがままなんだよ。
わがまま？
オーディションやって一番上手い人が吹いてほしい。選ばれないならちゃんと理由を滝さんに説明してほしい。それって全部大前ちゃんがスッキリしたいからでしょ？
So yeah, bad idea. But to Kumiko's credit, she is right in that as club president, she cannot ignore the concerns of the band members the way Reina is willing to. That doesn't mean they're right, but she must acknowledge their concerns and find the best solution. The first step she takes is asking Taki-sensei privately about some of the audition results. From this conversation, she recognizes that all Taki's thinking about is the music and what team composition will give them their best chance at nationals, which is exactly what Kumiko, Reina, and Shuichi want. In other words, it was disrespectful to doubt Taki-sensei so much, or at the very least, to lay all the blame at his feet. He's focusing on what he should be focusing on, and they need to trust him and also accept part of the blame for the band's current state themselves. They are the ones who pitched the idea of having multiple auditions in the first place. So then, how should they deal with the band members' confusion and dissatisfaction? During practice, when someone brings up their concerns, Kumiko tries to tell them,
今練習中だからとりあえず後にしよう話は聞くから
and
部内のそういう声は幹部も理解していますただ今年はこの形で進めると決めたので
which unfortunately comes off as Kumiko hiding behind the club exec's title and also instead of receiving their complaints, just trying to shush them. The club leader's biggest mistake is failing to communicate their feelings to the club members, which, as Asuka suggests by way of roast, should be something Kumiko is uniquely good at, considering how many times she's unintentionally blurted out-of-pocket remarks throughout her life. But after taking on this leadership role and trying to grow past her middle school identity, Kumiko somewhat lost that habit, not realizing what an asset it could be. Because, as the club prez, Kumiko needs to learn that she can't just expect the band members to think like her. She and the other leaders need to clearly and openly communicate what they are thinking so that the band can all be on the same page working towards the same goal. And with that little push from Asuka and Kaori, she does just that with an impassioned speech that addresses the band's concerns and inspires them to push past the Kansai competition and proceed to nationals for the first time in 2 years.
それでも私は北内で全国金を取りたいわがままかもしれないでもここにいるメンバーと不満も戸惑いも全部吹き飛ばす最高の演奏をして全国に行きたいんです
So, after all is said and done, what made Kumiko a great club president? What makes a great leader? Well, if you ask Kumiko, she'd probably say, for one, honest and open communication. Make yourself available at any time to hear your team's concerns and take them seriously. Secondly, make sure everyone is on the same page with the team's goals, and they all understand why they're doing what they're doing. Third, own up to your own mistakes. It's okay for a leader to apologize if necessary. And fourth, show your team that you believe in them and remind them that their hard work will pay off.
Ora. もし来年私より上手い子が入ってきたらレイナはどうするんだろう一瞬頭をよぎったその疑問に私は蓋をした
私がまだです
そうでしたか決まりましたか
So let's recap what happens. As you know, in Kitauji Wind Ensemble's competition piece, Hito Tose no Uta, the third movement opens with a euphonium trumpet duet. And of course, our euphonium trumpet lovebirds, Kumiko and Reina, want to do it together. Reina, of course, has no trouble winning the trumpet part, or soli as they call it, in all 3 auditions. Kumiko wins the euphonium soli in episode 6 during the first round of auditions for the Kyoto competition. But then in episode 8, during the second round of auditions for the Kansai competition, she loses the soli spot to Mayu. In the third round of auditions for nationals, it is announced that Kumiko and Mayu tied, and Taki-sensei has decided to have them re-audition in front of the whole band and let them decide, as he did for Reina and Kaori in season 1. And when it finally came down for the band to vote, It again ended up as a tie, with Reina's vote being the tiebreaker. And who did she choose?
Ⅰ です。
わかりました。では全国大会のユーフォニアムのソリは𝙏𝙗𝙖𝙩マユさんに決定します。
In the novel, this played out a bit differently. Kumiko wins the soli in the third round of auditions, and that's that. There is no tie, and there is no re-audition with the whole band voting. So naturally, the change in the anime got a lot of fans talking. It's a devastating development that gives Kumiko her biggest setback ever, and right before the series finale. Many love this change, many hated it. But either way, we all cried just as hard as these fictional anime girls did. Which goes to show you the strength of the writing up to this point. Of course, this change is definitely the most controversial thing the Sound Euphonium anime has ever done in its adaptation of Ayano Takeda's novels. So, why did they make such a huge departure from the source material? What does this change add to the story? In 2016, Ayano Takeda wrote, "Hard work pays off, but not always in the way you hope it will." That's the rule I follow when writing the Eupho series. There's drama at schools other than Kitauji High School too, and all the club members are working hard. Whatever the outcome, I think they'll gain something they can cherish for the rest of their lives. Referencing this quote, Juki Hanada, the screenwriter for the Eupho anime adaptation, had this to say. Takeda-sensei once said, "Hard work pays off, but not always in the way you hope it will." And I've always kept that in the back of my mind. So for the final season, a big part of me thought it would be meaningful to have one of Kumiko's wishes not come true in the story. When it came to deciding which of her wishes would not come true, I considered maybe having her romance with Shuichi fail, or having her fail her college entrance exam, but neither of those felt right. After mulling it over, the idea of her losing the soli but winning gold at nationals was a development that I felt would be rewarding for Kumiko, even if it wasn't exactly what she had wished for. Losing gold at nationals was never an option for the ending of the series, but the choice of Kumiko not winning the soli wasn't necessarily a big departure from the story. Rather, isn't it a sign of the path that led Kumiko to her chosen career, as well as proof of Kitauji's growth? I consulted with Takeda-sensei, and she told me that the anime is the anime and it could have its own route. So that's not to say that the anime made a better choice than Ayano Takeda's own novels. I'm sure the decision to have Kumiko win in the novels was well considered and makes sense for the story as presented in the novels. But, you know, those novels, by the way, were published over half a decade ago in 2019, so I would be curious if Takeda would have had a different approach had she written them today. But as Takeda herself said, the anime is the anime, and it's only natural for it to pave its own path. Anime and novels are different mediums, and their stories have different structures and require different approaches. After all, people consume a weekly show much differently than they would a novel. The way I see it, because this season is the conclusion for not just the series as a whole, but also specifically for Kumiko's character arc and her coming of age, it makes sense to give Kumiko a setback that's more personal and more devastating than anything she's faced before. And you could argue that her losing the second round of auditions in episode 8 and the band going into disarray following that was enough of a challenge for Kumiko to overcome, but that was more as the club president. And maybe you could argue that Reina telling her she's a failure of a president was already enough to feel like Kumiko's biggest loss, but that's more about her relationship with Reina. I think we needed something that challenged Kumiko as an individual and more directly tied into her individual arc. In the Eupho 3 fanbook, series director Tatsuya Ishihara said this: "It's an anime original development where Kumiko experiences a major setback at this point. We thought that if we didn't let Kumiko experience failure at least once, it wouldn't truly be her story. So we added it. By giving Kumiko herself that feeling of frustration, she finally understands why Reina once said, 'I'm so frustrated I could die.'" Except, just kidding. Although it sounds like it, Ishihara did not say that in reference to Season 3 Episode 12, and this quote isn't in the Season 3 fanbook. He actually said it in this season 1 fanbook in reference to that season's 12th episode. But the point still stands. If you think about it, Kumiko hasn't really suffered a personal setback since season 1 episode 12. You know, the famous Umaku Naritai episode where she was also removed by Taki-sensei from a specific part in that year's ensemble piece. But she's grown and changed as a person so much since then. And you can see the difference now in what this setback means to Kumiko, how she handles it, and what she takes from it. So although this outcome is different from the one in the novels, in my opinion, it certainly does not betray Ayano Takeda's vision for the series as a whole. Ignoring the novel's version of the events, which I'm not super familiar with anyway because I haven't read the entire novel, let's just think about the anime as its own separate thing. If Kumiko had just won the soli in the final audition in episode 12, it may have been a pleasant ending, sure, but I think it would have given us the nagging feeling that Kumiko's life ended up working out kind of perfectly, and she didn't ever have to face a true loss. Juki Hanada said in the same interview, "A big factor for me was that Reina's wish to become pro musicians together with Kumiko was not going to come true. So if Kumiko had gotten the soli, I felt that she'd be the only one who had everything going exactly as she wanted." To add to that, we already talked about how Kumiko overcame Mayu by getting through to her and recognizing her passion for music. Mayu may say she doesn't care about playing the soli, but I think it would have disappointed her more than she would dare to admit had she lost the audition. Hard work pays off, but not always in the way you hope it will. Kumiko led Kitauji to gold at nationals, but she lost the soli audition. Reina led Kitauji to gold and is getting to study abroad for music school, but she doesn't get to do either with Kumiko. Mayu gets to perform with an ensemble, but she had to play by Kumiko and Kitauji's rules and take the soli from her. I think any other ending to the soli conflict would have just felt safe. And safe is okay, but this is not a safe series. Sound Euphonium is a show that dares to ask, how do you deal with failure? How do you deal with your future not shaping up the way you hoped it would? How do you deal with a difficult choice? What was the point of all your hard work?
頑張るって何ですか？たくさん練習して毎日毎日居残りしてそれで上手くなっても何もないかもしれないんですよ。そんなの当たり前だよ。一生懸命頑張って努力してでも結局ダメだったなんて誰にでもあることだよ。そんなことばっかりだよ。いつだって頭をよぎるよ。やってもダメかもって叶わないかもってこんなに練習して結果が出なかったらどうしようってうまくいかなくて後悔したらどうしようってでも私は頑張れば何かがあるって信じてる。それは絶対無駄じゃない。1年間みんなを見ていて思いました。こんなに練習しているのに上手くならないはずない。こんなに真剣に向き合ってるのに響かないはずない。北打ちなら取れる。私たちならできるはず。だから自信を持って今までやってきたことを信じて。だから私が伝えたいことは
Allow me to finish that thought, Prez. Have faith in your hard work and your goals and dreams, stay true to your convictions, and take the actions you won't regret. And now that I think about it, this may be the overarching theme of the entire series. I just showed you clips from Chikai no Finale in Season 3, but we also saw this theme in Season 2 with Asuka and Mamiko's character arcs, and we saw it in Season 1 with the Kaori vs. Reina trumpet solo audition, which is probably the most relevant here since Kumiko was put directly into Kaori-senpai's shoes for her soli audition. If you recall, back from Season 1, Kitauji's merit-based audition system was not put into place until Kumiko's first year, when Taki-sensei became the new club advisor. So when Kaori was a first year, Kitauji was still under a seniority-based system for choosing who gets to play what parts, particularly solos. Kitauji was also not known for having a competitive wind ensemble, and many of its members just didn't take it seriously. So as a first year, despite the fact that she was probably one of the most skilled trumpet players in Kitauji at the time, Kaori had no chance of getting a solo until her senior year. So she waited. Her second year comes around and there's this whole drama with Nozomi and many of the new first years trying to fight against the seniority system. Kaori tries to convince them to stay, but they all end up leaving the band. But Kaori stayed, and she continued to wait. Finally, her third year comes, and with it, her chance to play a solo. But this year, the club advisor is replaced by someone new, who abruptly changes Kitauji into a meritocracy, gives the students a much stricter practice regimen, and sets their sights on nationals, a place Kitauji has never been. But most importantly, he announces that Kitauji will now be holding auditions to decide who gets to perform and who gets what part. And just her luck, Kaori, who since her first year has always been the strongest trumpet player at Kitauji, is met by one special first-year trumpet player whose skills rival her own section leaders 2 years older than her. And when the audition results come out, Reina beats Kaori for the trumpet solo fair and square. This year was Kaori's last chance to play a solo, but fate had other plans for her. Like the kind senpai she is, she accepts defeat and attempts to make peace with it, despite others like Yuko wanting her to fight back. At this point, Kaori was used to waiting and letting others take priority before her. Her kind but passive personality making her not willing to advocate for herself, so she stays quiet. But something within her isn't satisfied. So when Taki-sensei offers students the chance to re-audition with the band voting, Kaori, possibly for the first time since she arrived at Kitauji, stands up for herself and requests to re-audition for the solo. She needs to hear Reina's solo with her own ears before she can truly accept the results. At the solo re-audition, they both perform beautifully, and the vote is tied. But when Taki-sensei offers the solo to Kaori, and this is the key moment, Kaori declines. In so many ways, Kaori paved the way for Kumiko, whether Kumiko realized it or not. It's interesting because they never had any significant one-on-one interactions, but they probably could have been really close. Kaori was the first big example for Kumiko of a senpai, a leader in the club, sacrificing her own personal dreams in favor of what was best for the club as a whole and for the next generations of students. She showed Kumiko how someone with a passive personality can still advocate for themselves, what it means to be a good senpai, a good leader, and what it actually takes to stay true to your convictions and work hard towards a goal as ambitious as getting gold at nationals. She showed Kumiko how to take the actions she won't regret. Anyway, Kaori-senpai might be one of my favorite senpais if you couldn't tell. That scene of her listening to Reina's solo during the prefectural competition at the end of season 1 with that gentle smile of acceptance, it always gets me. She is such a great senpai. But back to season 3. During the final Euphonium Soli re-audition, how do Taki, Kumiko, and Reina all take the actions they won't regret? Well, Taki-sensei believed Mayu and Kumiko were of genuinely equal ability, So he decides that instead of leaving it to a coin flip, he should let the entire band weigh in on who they believe will give them all the better shot at getting gold. Kumiko wanted the re-audition vote to have no biases, and for the band to vote purely based on the sound, not the players. So she decides to make it a blind audition. And Reina, well, after the vote ends up being perfectly tied between Kumiko and Mayu, the decision falls squarely on her. For someone like Reina, who has always held strong convictions, clear goals, and abundant self-confidence, this is probably the most difficult choice she has ever had to make, and she clearly feels the weight of it. Even though the audition is blind, for better or for worse, she obviously can still recognize which one is Kumiko. And as much as she would of course love to play the soli with Kumiko during nationals, they've been saying that since their date in episode 5, Reina needs to pick which player will give them the better chance at getting gold at nationals. Both are of course good choices, and you can never predict how the judges will respond to either of them, but Reina needs to make the decision she won't regret. On one hand, there's a question for Reina of, how will Kumiko feel if I don't pick her in this moment? She flashes back to the moment in season 1, right before the trumpet solo re-audition, when she and Kumiko promised never to betray one another. On that day, Kumiko bravely stood by Reina's side alone during the vote. But what about today? Right now? What would it mean to betray Kumiko? I think Reina knows at this moment that Mayu may be the better soloist, even if only by a slight margin. So if she chooses Kumiko at this moment, they will get to play together at nationals, and perhaps they will still win gold and all will go perfectly. But if they lose gold after Reina chooses Kumiko, Reina would have no one to blame but herself, and she'd feel like she betrayed Kumiko and Kitauji, and Kumiko would probably share in that guilt. They chose themselves over Kitauji. On the other hand, if Reina chooses Mayu, believing her to be the better soloist, and they still lose gold, at the very least, she would have no regrets about her choice. Kumiko and Reina will be satisfied knowing they did all that they could to get Kitauji gold, and they can safely pass that goal to the next generation to make it come true. But in the end, none of those what-ifs matters. Reina's task in this moment is to definitively determine on sound alone whose soli will give Kitauji even the tiniest, slightest, better chance to win gold. And she chooses Mayu. And Kumiko makes the decision that no matter who wins the re-audition, she would stand confidently before the band and declare that this was the best choice for the Kitauji Wind Ensemble, and with it, Kumiko and Reina took the actions they wouldn't regret. That doesn't necessarily mean they made the objectively best decisions or the right decisions, but you can't help but be proud of them for staying true to their convictions. Because even if you take the action with the least regrets, that doesn't mean it won't be difficult or frustrating. Kumiko and Reina wanted to lead Kitauji to gold at nationals above all else. In an ideal world, they would have gone to do that, and play the Euphonium trumpet duet together, and go off to music college together and become professional performers. But the real world isn't ideal. They had to choose which of their wishes they wanted to prioritize over the others. Like Kaori-senpai before them, they made the difficult choice to relinquish one of their dreams for the sake of Kitauji and Kitauji's future generations. If that isn't what leaders do, then I don't know what is. And while Kumiko may have lost the soli audition to Mayu, if you think about it, it's really impressive how far she got. Mayu is fully devoted to music and nothing else. The reason she is so skilled is because she did little else but practice. But Kumiko, on the other hand, has had to juggle practicing with managing the band as the club president and dealing with all the band members' problems throughout this season. On top of that, she was also struggling all season with her future career path. And by the time the re-audition rolled around, she had just made up her mind that she wasn't going to pursue music after all. The fact that despite all that, Kumiko still basically tied with Mayu is already evidence of both her talent and her hard work paying off. Just, not exactly in the way she hoped. The last question I want to answer today is, why did Kumiko choose the career path she did? What led to her becoming a teacher, and more specifically, the assistant club advisor to the Kitauji High School Wind Ensemble? We already established that she had a natural talent for supporting people, which led her to eventually become an ideal club president. But beyond that, Kumiko was so focused on her club duties that she had no idea what she wanted to do after high school. And she spends the entire season trying to decide. Over the course of season 3, she talks to and gets advice and suggestions from many different people. When Kumiko talks to her father, he assures Kumiko that he won't force anything on her, and she ought to ask her sister for advice. When Kumiko talks to Michie sensei during the teacher-student conferences, she is told not to overthink it, as life will seldom go as planned anyway. Wink wink. When Kumiko runs into her middle school friend Azusa, she suggests Kumiko to stay on the path of music because even if she's not sure if it's her true passion today, it could blossom into that down the line. Plus, there are many professions that a music education could lead to other than just a performer, if that sounds unrealistic. When Kumiko talks to Hazuki after they visit the college fair together, she reveals that she's going to become a nursery school teacher after Michie sensei suggested it to her. Sometimes a trustworthy adult can see your future more clearly than you can. When Kumiko talks to her mom, she says, "It doesn't matter what you do as long as you can make a living," which, yeah, thanks mom. When talking to Sapphire, Sapphire has this to say.
今の毎日は種まきみたいなもので、まだ知らない未来の楽しみをいっぱいいろんなところに埋めているようなものなんじゃないかなって。
When she sees Mizore after her university concert, she asks what Mizore would think if Kumiko also went to her music college. And Mizore says this.
なんとも思わない。
なんとも。
だってそんな姿想像できない。
When Kumiko talks to her sister Mamiko, in episode 7, she encourages her to find her passion but embrace the struggle. But I actually really want to talk about their conversation in episode 11, when Mamiko is helping Kumiko get ready to attend Mizore's concert. Because while everyone else Kumiko talked to was kind enough to offer advice or suggestions, I think Mamiko is the only one who really understands Kumiko's struggle and shows it. Legitimately, this conversation might be my favorite scene in the entire season, or one of them, because of the attention to detail at every moment of the interaction. Kumiko enters the conversation clearly on edge, expecting another "hurry up and decide already, what are you waiting for?" kind of reaction from her sister, but Mamiko doesn't give her any of that. Kumiko notices and starts to open up. It's the first time Kumiko has felt comfortable to truly open up about her troubles this season, and she starts to get teary-eyed. And Mamiko doesn't necessarily offer much but her ear for support, and in her sparse responses, she's careful not to add any extra pressure on Kumiko. But she proves that good listening runs in the family. It's just a beautifully written scene, and according to the Eupho 3 fanbook, it's also one of Tomoyo Kurosawa's favorite scenes.
なんとなくっていうのが一番抗えないからね。
学校でね、オーディションがあって、ソリが私から別の子になった。すごい練習して上手くなって絶対取り返すぞって思ってるけど、なんていうか、
まあ大人になるってそういうことかもね。
え？
知らないけど。
So anyway, Kyoani, when are we gonna get to Mamiko merch? The last person Kumiko talked to this season is, of course, her best friend slash lover, Reina, who was, well...
音大にしたら鎧塚先輩みたいに。そんな風に決めていいもんじゃないでしょ。
音大は鎧塚先輩も無事入学したわけだし。
またそれ。
音大でいいんじゃないの？
レイナって本当に私に音大勧めてくるよね。
やっぱり音大は嫌なの？
Reina means well. She knows she's going to music school and she just wants her girlfriend to come with her, or at least be on a similar path as her. This of course reminds me of Liz and the Bluebird. In that film we learned that Mizore got a recommendation for music school. Mizore is unsure about going until Nozomi says that she'll go too, but Nozomi herself isn't certain that she really wants to go or is even cut out for it. Anyway, while I was watching season 3 last year, I couldn't help but wonder if Kumiko and Reina's relationship would end the same as Nozomi and Mizore's, with them parting ways after high school. Or would Kumire be a counter to Nozomizo, and at the end of high school they would end up together happily ever after? After all, Kumiko and Reina's love for each other has proven to be stronger and more mutual than Nozomi and Mizore's, at least until episode 9. Unfortunately for the future of Kumire, their paths would diverge just like Nozomizo's at the music school decision.
今の気持ちで行くのは失礼な気がする。
じゃあ普通の大学？
それが普通なんだと思う。私みたいに目標がない人間にとっては。そう。でも、それはそれで嫌なんだよね。保留にするのは簡単だけど、それはきっとダメなんだよ。なんか見つけなきゃ。レーナ！私、やっぱり音大には行かない。平気だよ。私たちは変わらない。
久美子。
レーナは特別だから。私にとって唯一変わらない。私の特別だから。
じゃあもっと特別になってくる。
So what did Kumiko end up finding? And how has her past led to her future? Let's trace Kumiko's life chronologically from the beginning. When she was a kid, she admired her sister Mamiko, who played trombone in her middle school wind ensemble. So, Kumiko joined the wind ensemble in elementary school, but was stuck with the euphonium since no one else wanted it. In middle school, she became skilled enough in the euphonium to beat one of her senpais in an audition, which led to some drama. Due to her passive personality, when Kumiko's middle school band failed to proceed to nationals, she was fine with it until she met a crying, frustrated young Reina who started to change her outlook, especially when they reunited in high school. Reina's passion for the trumpet inspired Kumiko, and when she was faced with her first major setback, she realized she desperately wanted to improve. And most importantly, she realized,
私、UFO が好きだ。
she loves the euphonium. And that's season 1. In season 2, Kumiko finds herself getting involved with other bandmates' problems. At the same time, there's also drama at home with her sister wanting to quit university. Kumiko learns that Mamiko unwillingly quit band to focus on getting into university and obey their parents. Now she regrets her decision and urges Kumiko not to be left with any regrets herself. Kumiko learns that lesson in real time when Asuka nearly quits the band to focus on her studies as well. Season 2 has Kumiko learn to appreciate her sister, her senpais, Taki-sensei, and her bandmates. And this culminates at nationals. Even though Kitauji wins bronze, this is what she tells her sister afterwards.
お姉ちゃん、私、UFO 好きだよ。お姉ちゃんがいたから私、UFO 好きになれたよ。お姉ちゃんがいたから、吹奏楽好きになれたよ。
She loves wind ensemble. And that's season 2. Season 3 and the movies covers Kumiko's experience dealing with mainly underclassmen, but also with Mayu, someone who, as we've already discussed, challenged her both personally and as Kitauji's club president. At the very end, Kumiko was tasked with prioritizing herself or Kitauji, and she chooses Kitauji. In episode 13, she says to the band right before they go on stage at nationals,
私は北氏が好きで、滝先生が好きで、みんなが好きです。 そんなみんなと金賞を取りたい。
She loves Kitauji. And that's season 3. It's gradual, but over the course of 3 seasons and the movies, there is a slow progression with Kumiko searching for, drilling down, and finding what she is really passionate about. This is why Kumiko found herself back at Kitauji as an adult. But the other part of that is her line, "I love Taki-sensei." We know she was inspired by Reina, but possibly more so than that, she was inspired by her teachers, which is why she became one. Particularly in season 3, it's her conversations with Taki-sensei and Michie-sensei that seem to have the most impact on Kumiko. Starting with Michie-sensei, there was their student-teacher conference in episode 5, where Kumiko admits to having a passive personality, but after their discussion, Michie counters with,
少なくとも今の言葉は流されがちな生徒の言葉ではないと思ってな。
Then there was the moment after the kansai competition in episode 11 where she says,
年を取るとな、若者が頑張ってるだけで涙腺が緩むもんなんだ。
And then there's their final student-teacher conference in episode 12 where she tells Kumiko her career path decision was exactly as she expected, to Kumiko's shock.
大人ってすごいですね。
心配するな。大人になったらすぐ思うようになる。子供ってすごいとな。
And although this scene I mentioned earlier from episode 7 isn't a conversation between Kumiko and Michie-sensei, I think it's pretty relevant here too.
道枝先生ああ見えてみんなのことを一人一人ちゃんと見てくれてるよね。すごくない？
確かに全員の性格とか希望も全部覚えてるし。
うん。
先生ってすごいな。
Kumiko also had several illuminating conversations with Taki-sensei. In episode 3, there was their conversation about growing up.
今の自分はどちらかというと子供の延長線上な気がします。
先生がですか？
ええ。こうやって年を重ねてみると、自分が大人か子供かというのは周りの環境によって決まるのだと思います。
In episode 11, after Taki praises Kumiko for her speech in episode 10, they have the conversation about Taki-sensei once comparing teaching a high school band with the River Styx.
ここで指導するようになって2年半。正直、最初はモチベーションを保てるか不安でした。毎年メンバーが変わる楽団で、毎年一度しかない大会を目指すようなものですから。
確かに。そう改めて言われると変ですよね。学校の吹奏楽って。
大学生だった頃、彼女に言ったことがあるんですよ。それはサイの河原で石を積んでいるようなものじゃないかって。
奥さんはなんて答えたんですか？
石じゃないよ、人だよと。
And last but not least, there is their conversation in episode 12 when Kumiko asks Taki-sensei to make the final soli audition blind, and they get into a discussion about the challenges of achieving one's ideals.
生徒がこんなにもしっかり向き合っている。自分が理想としているところに到達するのは難しい。皆さんのような生徒に出会えたことを幸運に思います。
先生。先生にとって理想の人ってどういう人ですか？
そうですね。正しい人でしょうか。本当の意味での正しさは皆に平等ですから。大前さんはどんな大人になりたいですか？
私もそんな人になりたいです。
And if you ask me, she has.
員の皆さん、北宇治高校吹奏楽部へようこそ。